My name is Alex Defoe, and I'm the editor of the newly released book Consciousness Beyond the Body, Evidence and Reflections. So I'd like to talk today a bit about the book, some of the content that you'll find there, and also obviously where to download it. So the book was released as completely open access, which means you can download it for free, read it and share it with anyone you'd like. And you can head over to my website, alexdefoe.com, to obtain a copy. So Consciousness Beyond the Body fundamentally explores this question of, what is consciousness, and can our consciousness actually separate or leave the physical body temporarily? And this is a question that parapsychologists, philosophers, thinkers have been asking for millennia. It really comes down to the mind-body debate, and what is the interaction between mind and brain, between consciousness and physical matter. So one of the things that the book aims to do is to explore the evidence. Is there any evidence that consciousness could in fact exist separately to a physical body? Then it also explores alternative theories. So you'll find quite a vast number of theories throughout the book that look at sociological, anthropological, philosophical explanations and theories of the out-of-body experience, and how can we account for these out-of-body states and near-death states in which people claim that their consciousness has left the body. So the book presents a balanced view of the evidence, of alternative theories, alternative explanations, as well as the explanation of the survival hypothesis, so the explanation that in fact consciousness may have left the body. So it is a controversial book. It is a contentious issue in that regard, in that there are some people that of course take the spiritualist religious view, and others take the more skeptical materialist view. So I hope that at least, if anything, this book gets you to start questioning and asking some of these things yourself and considering the nature of consciousness. This is my main intention with any of the work that I'm involved in, is to start asking some of those big questions rather than necessarily taking a position or trying to convince you one way or the other. So just to give you an overview of the book, it is split into 3 key sections. Predominantly, Consciousness Beyond the Body looks at out-of-body experiences. It does cover near-death experiences, lucid dreams, and other altered states, but the main focus is on OBEs. So you'll find in section 1 theories of the out-of-body experience and some background about this unique, this transformative human experience where we feel like we've actually separated from the physical body and our consciousness has gone off somewhere else. So the first chapter by Nelson Abreu really starts with this question of, what is the out-of-body experience? How do we understand it? How do we make sense of it? He canvasses accounts of out-of-body experience across the world, common characteristics and features, and how we make meaning of this experience. This is followed with Louis Minero's chapter from the International Academy of Consciousness, who looks at other explanations of the out-of-body experience, and is it a real experience of leaving the body? Is it perhaps a hallucination or an illusion? And he really tackles some of these questions and gives his own experiences and his own conclusions about the OBE. Then in chapter 3 we look at the phenomenology of lucid dreams and out-of-body experiences. So in this chapter, Ed Kellogg asks the question, is an out-of-body experience a type of dream, perhaps, or is it similar to a lucid dream where one is actually aware that they're having a dream? Ultimately, Kellogg concludes that no, the out-of-body experience is in fact not a type of dream, and in fact not a lucid dream, but an entirely new experience. And I think at this point the book really begins to open up some of these areas of inquiry into consciousness states. How do we delineate different states of consciousness? Because certainly there has been a lot of confusion, a lot of ambiguity about these different states, and moving between sleep paralysis into out-of-body experience, into lucid dreaming, into other states of consciousness, where researchers and theorists have suggested, well, this is kind of a similar experience, or it occurs in a similar pre-sleep state, therefore we should not necessarily distinguish these unique experiences. So Ed Kellogg suggests that, in fact, we should distinguish the lucid dream as a unique type of altered state that is different from an out-of-body experience. So again, if you'd like to know why that's the case, check out the book and some of Kellogg's reasoning for this. Then the final chapter in section 1 is by Ryan Hurd, which looks at anthropological and philosophical basis for the out-of-body experience. So why do we find these states of consciousness so compelling and so interesting? And Ryan Hurd provides a number of theoretical frameworks from which we can begin to understand our own interest and our own development, and how this may contribute to having OBEs, and also how we might use this knowledge to explain the out-of-body experience. So then we move on to section 2, which looks at the evidence and reviews whether there is compelling evidence or not of out-of-body travel. So we have chapters from Robert Peterson, Preston Dennett, Graham Nichols, and Jürgen Zyway, which look at the evidence for out-of-body travel. So they review a number of cases, some of those are their own experiences as well, where they sensed a separation from the body, perhaps leaving the body and then coming back and recollecting some information, and then having that validated afterwards. So again, the book is not trying to prove anything or convince you of anything, but it is showcasing some of those compelling anecdotes and leaving it up to the reader to decide, what is the OBE really about? Have these individuals that are documented in the chapters actually left their body, or is there some kind of other explanation? So this is really what many of the cases and many of the anecdotes throughout those chapters prompt. In section 2, you'll also find some writing about research methods into looking at out-of-body and near-death experiences, some of the limitations that we have in really tackling those questions, and perhaps how we can overcome some of those limitations. So in particular, towards the end of these chapters, and as a major part, in fact, of chapter 7 and chapter 8 by Nichols and Zyway, these authors look at, what are some other ways that we can go about investigating the OBE and perhaps conducting research in this area that would give us a more definitive answer into whether there is something more to the experience or whether it is in fact just a hallucination or an illusion. And certainly in terms of my own background of reviewing much of the parapsychology and psi literature, I believe that this debate is far from over, even though you'll find skeptical scientists that suggest that there is no debate. Obviously, we just have a physical body, a material self that then dies, and there's nothing else. There's just this pitch black, or that's the end. Whereas I found this certainly isn't as clear cut. It's a contentious issue that deserves to be discussed, which is in fact why I endeavoured to edit this book in the first place and to bring some of this knowledge and awareness to the forefront. So we move on to section 3, the final section of the book, which looks at the practical applications of the out-of-body experience. So even if you don't believe in OBEs or think that there's nothing much to them, section 3 asks the question of what can we do during the experience? How can we have fun while being out of body? How can we learn from the experience as a transformative altered state? So we don't necessarily even have to delve into the question of realism or reality in the OBE. Instead, we can ask the pragmatism question. In many ways, lucid dreamers and lucid dream authors have been asking this question for many years now. How can we use lucid dreams to have fun, during our dreams while we sleep, to actually enjoy that experience? In the same way, the authors in section 3 of my book look at how we can actually utilize the OBE. So the section starts off with Dr. Claire Johnson's chapter, which looks at creativity and enjoying the out-of-body experience. So she mentions that some people are really frightened of having an out-of-body experience. This is really a confronting experience for them and can be quite daunting. So she addresses some of those fears first and foremost, and then the remainder of the chapter looks at the applications. Once we get over our fear of having the OBE, and this might be spontaneous out-of-body experiences that you're having, or it could be that you want to learn how to self-induce them, but you've got some kind of fear or inhibition to learning, you'll find Johnson's chapter especially useful in terms of overcoming some of those fears and really getting into induced out-of-body travel and having fun with the experience. So Johnson's chapter is followed by Robert Wagner's chapter, which looks at a continuation of using the out-of-body experience for self-exploration. So Wagner takes a slightly different stance, and he's more interested in exploring the different variations of consciousness states. So he talks first about lucid dreams and then moves into a discussion of OBEs and how in fact we might be able to move between a lucid dream and an out-of-body state, or sleep paralysis and an out-of-body state, for instance. So he really encourages readers to play with this experience of consciousness to be able to shift states. And in fact, he suggests a shifting state hypothesis for consciousness, that the experiences we have, the altered state experiences we have, are not discrete or singular events, but in fact occur on a continuum, and we can move between the different states. So this is really, I found one of the highlights of the book in terms of advancing some of the theories and ideas related to consciousness. So ultimately, Wagner concludes by suggesting that we need to research consciousness more and develop these taxonomies. How do we move between states, and how do we better understand unique states of consciousness on the spectrum of experience? The final two chapters, chapter 11 is by Preston Dennett. So Dennett actually contributed 2 chapters, one to the evidence section and one to the application section. In the application section, he looks at the healing potentials of out-of-body experiences, what people might have learnt when having an OBE and coming back in terms of benefiting from that, physical health-wise, emotional and mental health-wise, and this link between health and the out-of-body experience. So for anyone that is familiar with the literature, you'll already know that in the near-death experience literature, many people come back from this state with a newfound sense of peace, of tranquility, deeper emotional connectedness to others. So this is one area that I find particularly compelling about OBEs and NDEs. This returning back to the body with this newfound sense of awareness. So Dennett explores the physical side more so. So this is also quite interesting because much of the literature has looked at the emotional and mental side of these experiences. And he suggests that physical healing can in fact occur in the out-of-body state. And finally, I finish off the book with a philosophical exploration of consciousness, and I also present a number of meditations and reflections for readers to consider in terms of looking at OBEs from a practical perspective. So I ask questions like, is mind separate from brain? Did you always have a strong sense of embodiment in your physical self, or have you felt like that's been more fluid? So I ask readers to grapple with some of these questions from an experiential and practical perspective, rather than just thinking about them. And I also introduce some of the methods that we may be able to use to induce OBEs more reliably. So I talk about Google Cardboard, which is a new application developed for using virtual reality. Still in the very early stages, but I believe that virtual reality applications such as this could provide a new gateway into the mind. Then I also talk about the Lucia Light hypnagogic trance machine, and also the recently developed Pandora Star device, which uses light strobing technologies in an aim to induce out-of-body experiences. Alright, so there you have it, a basic overview of consciousness beyond the body. I do hope that you'll head over to the website and have a look at the book. I'm also eager to receive any comments, remarks, reviews about the book. All of the authors have put in an immense effort into putting this together, and it's been a long process, the last 18 months of thoroughly editing the book and making sure that it comes to you as a comprehensive piece on the out-of-body experience, but also an interesting work on the out-of-body experience that really grabs your attention. And I do hope that you learn something new from the book. So thank you for watching, and I look forward to hearing your comments.